Frank, we start for the doink for the division. The 15th straight time Kansas City wins a one-score game. That is incredible, an NFL record. They get their 9th straight AFC West title. This is a game that they dominated in the first half. The Chargers came out as a different team in the second half. But as always, I feel like what we say every week, somehow, some way, like they doinked in the winning kick. Like this season, the deal with the devil is real and it's unstoppable for Kansas City.
I can't even believe this anymore, Fitz. Like we sit here every Sunday night, and how many times have we talked about basically the same thing? Oh, yeah, Chiefs didn't play great. They let this team take a lead late in the fourth quarter, and we all knew what was going to happen next. And what happens? Mahomes makes a ridiculous play to keep the drive going. It's a downfield Xavier Worthy. He makes another ridiculous play on 3rd and 7 to basically bleed the rest of the clock, not let Justin Herbert have any time, hitting Travis Kelce for a first down. And then it was in the back of my mind of winning 14 straight one-score games that they had done coming into this game is basically equivalent to hitting a 14-team parlay. And any dabblers out there like us know how hard that is. Like the odds are just against you. No matter how good of a bettor you are, you're not hitting a 14-team parlay. Something's got to go against you at some point. So the thought was in the back of my mind of maybe this just gets blocked. Like that happened against the Broncos a few weeks ago. Broncos are in line for an easy field goal to win the game. Chiefs block it. They win the game that way. I'm thinking, what if he misses? And obviously he mishit that ball. Matthew Wright mishits it. And it hits the left upright and it bounces in. Like everything is going right for the Chiefs right now. And I feel the need to say this. We've both said this. When you have Andy Reid, when you have Patrick Mahomes, you're going to win more than half of your one-score games. That's just the way it is. You have one of the greatest coaches of all time, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. But 15 in a row is so ridiculous. It just defies any logic. Like this is, it's so ridiculous. And I know that fans are kind of fed up about this. Like it should be this cool story, right? Like the Chiefs keep winning these close games that are fun and all that. But we've seen it happen over and over and over and over again. And I've used this joke 100 times. I'll use it 101 now. It's the Breaking Bad meme of Jesse screaming, "How does he keep getting away with this?" That is the Chiefs NFL fans right now. Who could believe that they find all these different weird ways to win one-score games?
I honestly think the general fan community would be more behind this team if they were just killing everybody every week. If they were absolutely dominating and crushing everybody, then you'd be like, this is fun to watch. But when you're sitting here, like I sat up in my chair with about 5 minutes left, and I literally said out loud to my dog, can't wait to see how they squeeze this one out. Like, that's just what it has. Like,
It's
that's
silly.
what you
It's
know
silly.
is going to happen. But, like, I do think you're right. There's this fatigue, and this fatigue is real because most of us sit and watch our favorite team lose these games over and over and over again. Like, I'm all in for appreciating greatness, but I don't know that we're necessarily seeing what we usually qualify as greatness. The ability to win close games is its own type of greatness. But in our minds, we think of greatness as you boat race everybody every week. You're clearly the best team. It's painful watching a lot of these Chiefs games. You're like, all right, they're going to pull it out, but none of this is going to be fun or exciting to watch. Like it's a different world. We have to get used to the fact that we're winning. We're watching the Chiefs win in the ugliest ways possible, but it doesn't matter because all they do is win.
Yeah, and it goes down, like you were saying, it comes back to like, do they quote unquote deserve to be 12-1 at this point? The answer is probably not. They're probably not playing at the level of a normal 12-1 football team, but they just have this uncanny ability to win games at the end or just get lucky. Like the Raiders win. Like that, there was nothing particularly skillful about the missed snap and hitting Aidan O'Connell in the chest, right? Like that was kind of lucky. But when you win a game like this, or Chargers take the lead with 4:30 left, and you just kind of know, you know exactly how the script is going to play out the rest of the way because we've seen it so often. Even when they're in 3rd and long, you're like, how's he going to get out of this one? Oh, he's going to contort his body and hit Xavier Worthy downfield for some ridiculous first down. Like, you just kind of expect it at this point, which says something about the greatness of Patrick Mahomes. But to your point, like, I think that, yes, people would maybe be more behind this Chiefs team if they're blowing everybody out. But at the same time, we're just sick of the Chiefs. There's Chiefs fatigue. There's no doubt about it. And watching them win like this every single week is adding to it because it's crazy. This should not happen. Like the law of probability against you winning 15 straight one-score games, even if you have a little bit of an edge, what the Chiefs obviously do, is still ludicrous. Like that just should not happen. But yet every single week we sit here on Sunday night and talk about, wow, that Chiefs team, crazy how they won again. They're 2 games up now for the 1 seed. They're probably going to be 2 home games in the playoffs away from going to yet another Super Bowl. And yet we're going to get to the end of the season and be like, was that a great team? They went like 15-2 and won a Super Bowl again.
When they three-peat,
was that great?
I don't matter. When they three-peat, it won't matter. I will say this, Chiefs fans, all I ask is this. In 2040, when Mahomes and Reed aren't playing anymore, and you have a year where suddenly every ball doesn't bounce your way, just remember this one. Just go back and remember this. That's all of us
the grace period for this is more than a decade. Like, yeah, you can't really complain about any close loss for a long, long time because every single break we are going to have to just do one of these inside coverage episodes. We should just list all the different ways the Chiefs have won these one-score games, and it's just going to be mind-boggling because it just seems like a little bit different way every week, including this one, doinking in a field goal to win the division. Crazy.
All right, Frank, let's look at some of the rest of the big games throughout Sunday's action. Maybe the biggest one was the shocker to me. I kept looking at this Rams-Buffalo game thinking, all right, the Bills are going to wake up. And they did, but by the time the Bills really woke up, they were already dug into a big hole. They couldn't dig their way out. It felt like one of those games that the Rams were hanging on for dear life, but by God, they got every point they needed. 44-42, the highest scoring total in the NFL this year. The Bills go down, and this game has consequence, man. Like, you and I have talked so much about the fact that home field advantage is just something that's going to be plucked away from one of these really good football teams. I'm sitting there thinking the Rams are going to be the reason that the AFC goes through Arrowhead yet again, and that changes the entire landscape of the AFC.
Yeah, still a ways to go, but the Bills just can't afford to lose games like this. And I thought this was a tricky spot for the Bills. I really did. But the way this game unfolded was so weird. Like, if you would have told me that Josh Allen accounted for 6 touchdowns in this game and they put up 42 points and lost, like, this is not a Bills defense that has been even remotely bad all season. They've been really good. I really don't know what happened to them in this game. They got a punt blocked in return for a touchdown. Puka Nacua made every single play you can make. By the way, Puka Nacua is awesome. Like, if you were worried at all about some sophomore slump or his rookie season was a little bit of a fluke, no, not at all. He is just a fantastic football player who the Rams totally trusted at key moments. There's a 3rd and 5 late in the game. The Bills are storming back. It's 38-35. What do they do on 3rd and 5? They just call a receiver screen to Puka Nacua, who houses it for 19 yards and pretty much puts the game away at that point. Although the Bills had their chance, but they try a quarterback sneak on 1st and 1 at the goal line, gets stopped, and they got to use a timeout. Like, what are you doing? Oh, Sean McDermott, no. This is not good game management. So they don't have all 3 timeouts left when they don't get the onside kick. So just one of these games that the Bills were really off. I don't look at this game and say, oh, the Bills got exposed, or we learned a lot about the Bills. I just think they went across the country, played a really well-coached Rams team, had a really bad day to have a bad day, and lose despite Josh Allen going nuclear in this game. He probably maybe clinched the MVP in a loss, which is almost impossible to do, but you can see how much Josh Allen means to this team, even in a loss. That Bills defense should be embarrassed, like really, truly embarrassed that guy could play so well, and they still don't end up with the win here.
By the way, this was the last week of the regular season for fantasy football players. The playoffs start next week. Everybody's desperately trying to find their way into seeding. Imagine if you had or were facing Josh Allen after a whole year where you were trying to take on the world. Josh Allen accounted for 51.88 fantasy points in standard scoring. That's the most by a quarterback in a single game in history. So it just continues this trend of like,
Fitz, I want to know who lost when they had Josh Allen. I want to see those box scores. Like, hit us up on social media about I had Josh Allen and still lost, because that is even more embarrassing than the Bills losing this game. If you had Josh Allen on your fantasy team and couldn't pull off the win this week.
Wasn't this the theme too for this year? Like, we don't talk a lot of fantasy football on this show, but fantasy football is the bread and butter of Yahoo Sports in so many ways, right? Like, a theme this year is like, it didn't really matter sometimes how good your roster was. You needed to have the one guy that week was going to go off. And it felt like every few weeks there was somebody that was like, oh, that guy got 40 points out of nowhere. Like, if you really were sitting there and you had Addison starting today and you're like, oh, I'm going to win my league because I have Addison going. Like, no, you're not. Yes, you were. Like, it's just funny that it came right down to the wire and all of a sudden you see epic performances. I think you're right, by the way. It is, at this point, very clear that if you want the one player that is absolutely willing his team in every possible way, that has to be Superman every week in order for them to win, and still manages to live up to that Superman expectation every single week, it is Josh Allen. The MVP of this NFL season is Josh Allen. The death of the Bills, as I've said repeatedly, is widely overreported. Let's see what happens to them in the playoffs. Sure, we can talk about whether or not they can get over the Kansas City hump in the playoffs, and games like today will matter for that because that game could now find its way to Arrowhead thanks to a loss to the Rams. But if we're being real right now, if there is one player in the NFL, one single player that you do not want to face because you have to absolutely try to take him away and you know you can't, it is Josh Allen. It is not Saquon. It is not Derrick Henry. Those are great stories. Josh Allen is the MVP of the NFL to me.
I agree with you. And I was trying to think of this today. When is the last time a quarterback was asked to do so much for his team? Like where it just seems like we've talked about this for years. I talked about this with Charles when we did a show together. We're talking about it with you this season. How many teams puts that much of a percentage, if you could quantify it, on their quarterback's shoulders? I guess maybe you could argue Lamar Jackson, who's come through in that spot a lot of times. I mean, maybe Russell Wilson in his later days with the Seahawks when he accounted for 37 to 38 touchdowns one year. But it just seems like the whole Bills strategy is Josh just go win us the game. Like that's just it's mind blowing to me that and he does it. He is Superman out there a lot of times, but it still wasn't enough. And when you look, I mean, if the Bills have to go to Arrowhead Stadium, and look again, a lot of football will be played, but if the Bills have to go to Arrowhead Stadium in January, this is the game they look back on and they say, we scored 42 on offense and we lost to a mediocre Rams team. That's what's going to be the difference between us maybe playing that game in Orchard Park and us playing that game in Kansas City. Now, again, a lot needs to be unfolded before then, but this is the kind of loss you look back on and you shake your head and you say, that was it. That was a turning point to our season and not in a very good way.
Also, you and I agreed that MVP should not simply be a quarterback award, but just because we don't want MVP to be a quarterback award doesn't mean that it shouldn't be a quarterback award if the MVP is actually a quarterback. Correct. There's nuance to all of this. One quarterback that is not an MVP is Kirk Cousins. Minnesota takes down Atlanta 42-21. And by the way, Sam Darnold, you and I talked about Sam Darnold being hot. He's got to get streaky, right? He's a bit streaky. He's got to get hot. He's now fire. This is hot. And I want to give him all the credit in the world. But at the same time, Kirk Cousins looks washed. And I think this is a little surprising to me. I know coming off the Achilles injury, I said repeatedly over the summer, I do not trust a quarterback that is 7,342 years old coming off an Achilles injury. I don't care if we're talking about Kirk or we're talking about Aaron Rodgers. I don't trust that. I still watched this and thought, man, I realized I didn't trust it. And I realized I could take my victory lap for being right. This doesn't feel good. This feels like you are watching somebody that is simply a shell of what we thought he was going to be.
Yeah, and we talked about this a little bit in the offseason about how everybody was so excited for the Falcons. Oh, they landed the quarterback. Great job. And it's like, well, are we sure? This is a big-time injury for an older quarterback. Then older quarterbacks don't age well unless you're Tom Brady. So you look back and you do have to ask yourself the question, how could the Falcons have been so reckless about this? How could the Falcons have just said, yeah, we're going to be fine. Here's how much money do you need, Kirk? You're coming off an Achilles injury. This contract leads through your age 39 season, I believe it is. But we're not worried about that at all. Maybe you should have been worried. This contract all of a sudden looks terrible because go back to early in the season, Kirk struggles. And then he got hot for a little bit. The Falcons kind of looked like they took control of the division. But in the last 4 games, he has no touchdowns and 8 interceptions. And that's not the only stat, but that's a pretty telling stat line. Everything for Kirk Cousins just looks slow. And it just looks like I said on the pick 6 last week against the Chargers, it looked like he was moving underwater. It was so slow and it came out slow and it was just telegraph pick to go the other way. He threw some absolutely terrible passes in this game. And our colleague Charles McDonald has written about this, that it's just time to try Michael Penix. And we've talked about the hard part is you have to be sure that this is the right time, because I don't think you can go back to Kirk if you flip that switch. But I'm kind of thinking it is time. I don't know what the Falcons do. They put themselves in a really, really bad spot here by kind of trusting that Cousins was just going to be Kirk Cousins and have no effects from an Achilles injury. It's kind of a bad scene right now. He's in a bad slump, and given the age, given his injury history now, I don't know that he gets out of it. I just wonder if, like you said, like this is it for Kirk Cousins as kind of a viable top end NFL quarterback. And he has been, like, people want to, just pile on Kirk Cousins all the time. He has been a good quarterback. He's had a good career. But what we're seeing now is just, this is unsustainable for the Falcons, and they're still in the playoff race. I know the Buccaneers are probably going to blow past them and win this division, but if you're the Falcons, you have to say, does Kirk Cousins give us the best chance to win the rest of the season? I don't think the answer to that is yes.
Amazing to think that if they made a quarterback change, the Falcons could be taking on the Raiders Monday night with Desmond Ridder starting for the Raiders and Michael Penix Jr., the quarterback most people thought the Raiders were going to draft, taking them on. Let me throw a hot take at you. All right, I'm just gonna throw out a fiery take, and we'll see what Frank Schwab thinks. Hear me out. What if Kyle Pitts and Drake London really aren't all that great at the NFL level, and now we've seen Desmond Ridder not be all that great? What if we looked at all of these weapons and we felt some kind of way about Arthur Smith, the head coach, and it turns out that maybe Arthur Smith wasn't necessarily the worst head coach? He was just playing poker with a really bad hand. Like, at some point, as these people separate, as Arthur Smith is farther away from the Falcons, and we thought that it would turn into this eruption. Pitts had 1 catch on 6 targets, but was just never a factor in this game. And Drake London has not been any sort of a consistent factor in any way, shape, or form. And as a Raiders fan, I was watching Desmond Ridder thinking, golly, this guy started in the NFL. Like, started in the NFL, and the Falcons tried to convince you he was capable of winning playoff games. Like, I don't see any of that. And it just made me think, man, maybe as we're sitting over here watching the Steelers continue to grow and grow and grow with their weapons, maybe Arthur Smith actually knew what he was doing all along, and the Falcons were holding Arthur Smith back, not Arthur Smith holding the Falcons back.
And Arthur's doing pretty well in Pittsburgh, isn't he? So, yes. And there are also people out there who will still try to convince you that it's totally fine that the Falcons didn't even try for Lamar Jackson when he was a restricted free agent because they had Desmond Ridder. Hey, there's nothing to see here, guys. Anyway, I will not go down that road again because people get mad at me when I
No. I think look, the more times we can point out this stupidity, we're going to.
They couldn't possibly try to sign Lamar Jackson, one of the greatest quarterbacks of his generation. Why even try? That makes no sense. Okay, whatever. But yes, once we get further removed, we do wonder. I think Drake London's been fine. He's a quality NFL receiver.
He's fine.
Kyle Pitts is not an NFL tight end at this point. Like, he's just not it. We're gonna look back and say, how did Kyle Pitts become one of like 3 tight ends in history with a 1,000-yard rookie season? That doesn't make any sense. This Falcons team is very flawed. Bijan's very good, but they have defensively still no pass rush. Like, there's just going to be an issue for them, especially when you use a 9th pick on a quarterback. You don't have a pass rush. And I get why they did it. I really do. But you look back now and you say, like, they just didn't help their defense enough. This defense got torched by Sam Darnold. A career high 5 touchdowns. And like you said, Sam Darnold has played good football this year. He had those, I think 2 games in the middle of the season, we started turning it over like crazy. You're like, uh-oh, is Sam Darnold falling apart? And he hasn't. He's righted himself. Give credit to him. Give credit to Kevin O'Connell. They got that thing fixed, and he looked great today, played great today. That team just keeps winning. Like, the Lions have to be like, what do we got to do? Like, we're 12-1, and we can't get any separation on the Eagles. We can't get any separation on the Vikings because the Vikings just keep winning games. It's very impressive. And the Vikings are coming toward this decision. We'll be talking about it for a long, long time as we head in the offseason. What do you do with Sam Darnold? Like, Josh Allen, I think, is clearly the MVP frontrunner right now. But now it's not just you vote for first place and that's it. You vote for second, third, fourth place. I think Sam Darnold gets some like second place votes, third place votes if he keeps playing like this. Like, he has been that good for the Vikings. And what do the Vikings do after the season? He's on a 1-year deal. And I know they got JJ McCarthy, but Fitz, how do you just move away from Sam Darnold if you go 14-3 and Sam Darnold finishes 4th in the MVP voting? Like, I don't know that necessarily you just say, yeah, we got JJ McCarthy, we're just going to let Sam Darnold walk. This is a very interesting situation developing.
Sam Darnold in this game was 22 of 28 for 347 yards and 5 touchdowns, including an average of 12.4 yards per attempt, which is staggering in general. This season, so far in the regular season, he's completing 68.5% of his passes for 3,300 yards, 28 touchdowns, and 10 picks. Like, there's plenty of football.
Like, who saw this?
This is, if I'm the Minnesota Vikings, there is no, from now on, I am looking at the quarterback instead of looking at the position and who I'm paying and how I'm paying and saving money. I'm looking solely at the quarterback as total dollars out at the position. And I'm willing to, knowing that I got JJ on a rookie contract, if I can get Sam to come back, I will pay Sam market value to keep him in the building, knowing that I can keep JJ on the rookie deal, and I can even make this a Jordan Love situation. If I can talk Sam Darnold into coming back, I will pay top market value to keep Sam Darnold simply because I know I have a quarterback. And as much as we think JJ might be the answer, my God, like this is a Minnesota Vikings team that today, as it stands, has a very real shot at the Super Bowl. If you have a quarterback that can win you a Super Bowl, do you really let that quarterback walk on the might could that your rookie is going to develop into being able to replace him? There's no way I can do that with a clean conscience. I'll keep them both and make them battle it out if Sam Darnold's willing.
But here's the problem. I mean, what is market value for Sam Darnold right now? I don't think he's like a $55 million a year quarterback, but I don't. If he finishes strong
Frank,
here,
I franchise. Look, it's a business. I'd franchise the hell out of him. I'd franchise the hell out of Sam Darnold. I mean,
because the goal is to find a top 10 quarterback, and you have one. Like, as crazy as that sounds, and I jumped on Sam Darnold a ton this offseason. He has proven, like, this season, he has been one of the 10 best quarterbacks in the NFL. The Vikings record reflects that. His stats reflect that. His play on the field reflects that. Other than a couple games where he really got into turnover trouble, he has been excellent. And once yes, you're right. Franchise has to be on the table at this point. Or if you want to just sign him to the contract, it probably costs you $50 million a year. Like, because somebody out there, the Raiders, the Jets, whoever it is who's desperate for a quarterback. We've all talked about how many teams are going to be desperate for a quarterback this offseason. Some team is going to look and say, Sam Darnold's only 28 years old. He was the third pick in the NFL draft for a reason. He got stuck in some bad situations with the Jets and the Panthers, but that guy we see on film right now, that guy is, again, top 10 to 15 quarterback in the NFL going forward. That's worth $50 million a year to us because we ain't got nothing. So, again, just a very, very interesting conundrum for what the Vikings do going forward because, again, the goal is to go find the quarterback. Well, they kind of found a quarterback.
Yeah, I can't believe we're sitting here saying franchise Sam Darnold, but that's real.
It's crazy.
I would limit his movement.
Crazy, but
I would limit his
credit to him. Credit to Sam Darnold, who has been, again, criticized and just blasted because he played in the New York media market and he's ripped as a bust and all this kind of stuff. For him to have this kind of resurgent season, I give all the credit to him. He looked awesome today. He looked absolutely great, and he's a big reason the Vikings are having this kind of weirdly under the radar 11-2 season.
The number of times I say a franchise will ruin a quarterback before a quarterback ruins a franchise. Think about it. I mean, Baker Mayfield was supposedly just done in this league. He is not done, right? Sam Darnold was done in this league. He is not done. And Geno Smith was done in this league. And now, while nobody's paying attention over here, you know, the Michael McDonald that doesn't sing with the Doobie Brothers has Seattle on a hot streak, 30-18 win over Arizona. Seattle alone in first place in the NFC West. And frankly, early on in the season, you and I talked about the Seahawks, and my thought was, I don't really know what to make of them. 1 week it looked up, and 1 week it looked down. And, you know, Geno, a little bit Geno giveth and Geno taketh away. At this point, I mean, without Kenneth Walker III, so they had to rely on Charbonnet, who had a big game in this situation. Arizona had no real answer to slow down Seattle's offense. And I think the Seahawks really came out and made a galvanizing statement that they are the best team in the NFC West. Like, we've been sitting here waiting for somebody to separate from the rest of the crowd in a crowded, mediocre division. And all I kept thinking watching the game is like, are we waiting for it, or is it right here in front of us? Because it certainly feels to me like Seattle has made the statement. They've got a better understanding of this new defense than I thought they would have this early. They were able to shut down Arizona some junk yards for Connor at the end, but really they kept Arizona in check through the majority of this game. And 30-18, game never felt like it was in question. It's just a statement win for Seattle.
Absolutely. I think you said it best. Never felt like it was in question. They came out and just ambushed them. It was impressive. I thought this was going to be a tough spot for Seattle. I got this game wrong. I thought the Cardinals were going to win it because, you know, we've talked about the Cardinals are a pretty good football team, well coached. They were good early in the season, and they came out and Kyler makes a couple of mistakes early and they get behind, and it was just, it's done deal at that point. Seattle looks like a team that is figuring things out. They went to the bye week. They're 4-0 since. That's what happens when you have some of these first-year coaches. It takes a little bit of time to get the schemes, especially Mike McDonald. We've talked about that. His defense is complicated. Well, this Seattle team looks like they get it now. And when you look, this puts Seattle Seahawks are up 2 games on the Cardinals now with the tiebreaker. it's not over because the Rams got a big win today. They kind of stick around in the NFC West race. The 49ers aren't dead yet, but they're pretty far behind in that. So you look and you say, who's winning? Who's winning this division? Who's winning this division? It's probably the Seattle Seahawks, which none of us were saying a month ago, but credit to them, man. I mean, they look good. Geno's playing pretty good ball. He's still, I mean, sometimes he has some plays where you're like, oh, Geno, don't do that. But he's kind of cutting them out. Jackson Smith and Jigba has just turned into a star receiver in front of our eyes. And I thought Charbonnet played big today. Kenneth Walker is one of the most dynamic backs in the NFL. When he was out, I thought, okay, yeah, Cardinals going to win this game. No, Charbonnet played probably the best game of his career, really set the tone in this one, was running hard. It just looks like the Seattle Seahawks are an absolutely positively different team than they were before their bye week. And we see this happen sometimes. It happened with the Buccaneers last year, really, when it's sometime around mid-November or whatever, kind of just flipped the switch and became a different team and kind of rolled into the playoffs. You can see that happening with the Seahawks now. I think they win this division. I think, like you said, they're the best team in the division. They're going to be the best team in the division going forward because they're going to keep, grasping McDonald's schemes and all that. Just a big day for the Seahawks. They really, like you said, statement win for them in many, many ways.
Yeah, and the Seahawks have gotten so dynamic. Like they pointed out in the broadcast, I think smartly so, that we thought at one point Tyler Lockett was going to be a big number one wide receiver, like a star, at least in this league, a really productive player. And he's become an afterthought in this offense, right? Like Jackson Smith and Jigba has become everything that you thought he would be, to the point that I think sometimes I forget about DK. Like DK isn't really he doesn't have to be lights out every single game. And you're right. The numbers bear it out. Zach Charbonnet, 22 carries, 134 yards, averaged 6 yards a carry. Also, I want to give Kenny McIntosh, their backup back, some credit. He got some big carries in there. Like this is a Seattle team that can beat you physically. So I'm really impressed with where the Seahawks are. It took me a minute to get to that point, but they've now won 4 straight coming off the bye. They are hot. They are now 8-5, which just feels dominant. They do have a stretch coming, though. They're about to have the Packers, then they have the Vikings, then they're in Chicago and at the Rams. So the Packers, Vikings, back-to-back weeks, they're going to be tested with some of the better teams in the NFC. No, the rest of it, no, but the Packers, Vikings will be a test.
Yeah, the Bears, we'll get to them. Oh, my goodness, sometimes. But yes, I mean, they are the kind of team, though, that they go and play the Packers or even the Vikings, and you're like, well, I don't know necessarily I'm giving those teams that game. Like, Seahawks can hang with anybody right now the way they're playing.
All right, we got every game to break down. We got to get to a bet that is absolutely wild and the continued demise of Aaron Rodgers. We'll break it down, but first we got to take a quick break. All right, Frank, let's get a quick game that sucked in here. Jacksonville beat the Titans 10-6. That's important because Jacksonville had the first overall pick heading into the day. They do not have the first overall pick anymore. That belongs to my beloved Raiders. The Jacksonville Jaguars get a win over Tennessee. I do think, though, that this was a necessary rock bottom for the Titans. Like this Jags team stinks. And I do a weekly hit in Nashville with the ESPN radio station there, 102.5 The Game. And the host was making it very clear that there are people around that city that are sitting there saying, Will Levis is the answer. Will Levis is the answer. And I keep saying, if you're in the AFC and you think you want to win, I think we have to remind everybody that the path to victory in the AFC particularly requires that you have a quarterback that can compete with Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert. I mean, the list goes on and on. I don't think there was ever a spot where Will Levis was that. He was not that today. And as a result, the Titans get beat by Mac Jones. Not just the Jacksonville Jaguars, but Mac Jones goes out. Mac Jones throws 2 picks and still beats the Titans. This was a trash game by 2 trash teams, but the trash loser at least gets the reminder that they need to reset.
Yeah, exactly. It was a big game for the Las Vegas Raiders and the New York Giants, who now are tied for the worst record in the NFL, and I don't think either of those teams is going to win another game. We'll see, but I wouldn't really mark them down for one. So we've talked a lot about Will Levis and if he's the answer. I think the question I am starting to pop up in my head is Brian Callahan the answer? Like, this team's awful. Like, they're bad. This is a bad football team. Is it possible Callahan's one and done? Like, I don't think so, but all of a sudden you look and you say that this is the team fired Mike Vrabel? Really? Like, for what? I don't know if this guy's the answer. Maybe he's just Zach Taylor 2.0 and has a couple of rough seasons early on and have patience and becomes a really, really good coach. Possible. But there's nothing about this Titans team this season that tells me that Brian Callahan is the right guy for this job. Like
I'll go a step further, Frank. There's nothing about this season that tells me Rand Carthon, their GM, is the right guy for this job.
That's true, too.
Like, give me the great acquisition that was so, they did well with the offensive line pick in the first round of this year's draft. But give me the moment where I'm like, oh, yeah, I see the direction. I just, when you are a bad football team, I don't think you just get rid of the coach. I think you have to just Control-Alt-Delete the whole thing. You got to like to use the data reference from people our age, you got to take the Nintendo cartridge out, blow in there, and then stick it in, wiggle it. Like, you got to reset the whole thing. They got to pull the Nintendo cartridge out, which means you got to get rid of everybody in that building that has any dirt on them. I'm talking about the coaching staff. I'm talking about the front office. I'm talking about scouts. I think you have to completely reset an organization to actually have a shot through a reset, and they didn't do that. And now Rand Carthon picks a coach. There's no proof of concept that Rand Carthon knows what the hell he's doing. I feel like the Titans are a disaster because they're just being run like a disaster.
There's just nothing positive. They're like, what? If you're a Titans fan looking forward to the future, what are you excited about? Like, there's just nothing there. And this team, I thought this bottomed out today. When you lose at home to that Jacksonville Jaguars team that's dragging along Doug Peterson, has Mac Jones starting. By the way, Mac Jones' rookie year seems like one of the weirdest oddities in the NFL. He was legitimately good that year. Like, you were like, wow, Mac Jones, Patriots got their next guy. Like, he was the best rookie season in that draft class who had 5 quarterbacks taken in the first round. And he's just fallen apart as a quarterback, but still beats the Tennessee Titans today. It's a bad football team, really bad football team. And like you said, like, I don't know what they do. I don't know if you go one and done with Brian Callahan, if you do run out Carthon. There's nothing positive about this Titans team right now, who is in the conversation for the worst team in football, especially after you lose to the Jaguars today.
Thank you very much, good sir. The worst team of football is my beloved Raiders, and we'll talk about that in a minute. The Jets lose to Miami 32-26 in overtime. Aaron Rodgers, his first 300-yard passing game since 2001, I don't know. It's been a very long time since he threw up 300 yards. He had a very good game, although it should be noted, even in his very good game, like his one deep ball to Garrett Wilson sent Garrett Wilson out of bounds. Should have been a touchdown. He sent Garrett Wilson out of bounds, right? Like, I still don't think it was a great, I know everybody thinks I'm tough on Aaron Rodgers. I am. But this was a moment where I thought with seconds remaining in this game, Miami didn't have Miami didn't get it won in regulation. I really thought we were going to be talking about, well, you know what? The Jets still showed up, but instead Miami gets the touchdown in overtime. They get the win, a big win for Miami, who continues to have the Jets number. But ultimately, this is just in part the Jets. They just aren't a good team. I don't know what happened to the Jets defense, but they looked awful today again.
Yeah, everything is falling apart for the Jets. I get that. But what I kept thinking during this game was, we've talked about, again, the desperation of quarterback this upcoming offseason. This is kind of an audition for Aaron Rodgers the rest of the year, maybe even to the Jets. Like, we've all heard by now, the reports are out there. Aaron Rodgers probably wants to play in 2025. Probably not with the Jets. Well, okay, that if he does become a free agent, what teams are going to have to look at Aaron Rodgers and wonder, is he going to be better next year? Like, another year older, all that kind of stuff. Games like this will allow teams to talk themselves into another year of Aaron Rodgers. Whatever team is the most desperate, who's like, we can squeeze another year out of him in a better situation. He looked good today. Yeah, he wasn't perfect. He like you said, the missed ball to Wilson, all that kind of stuff. But he looked generally good. I thought this was the best he's looked all season. Maybe he's getting healthy. This is what conversations are going to happen in front office. Oh, well, he was hurt early in the year. Look how he played. Look at that Dolphins game. Let's throw on that film. So that's what I kept thinking during this game. Like, this wasn't Aaron Rodgers' fault that they lost today. Like, the last time he touched the ball, he was putting them up by a field goal with less than a minute to go. And then the Jets just fall apart on special teams and on defense and just give it up at the end of regulation and in overtime. Jonnu Smith wins it on the touchdown. So I look at this as kind of an Aaron Rodgers, like, well, yeah, he probably does have something left in the tank, or at least somebody's going to convince themselves of it.
Yeah, unfortunately, you're probably right. By the way, let's just admit that Miami's offense is unlocked. I mean, this is Tua's playing really well. All right, and I know they got a lot of work to do, but like Tua is playing really well. Tyreek looked really good in this game. In fact, the fact that they could put up 32 points when they had absolutely no running game in this situation, like this game, they had nothing trying to run the football. It was a joke, but yet here we sit. So right now, if the playoffs were today, Miami is tied with Indianapolis for that last playoff spot. And I'm just saying, like, I know we say this all the time, but the team you don't want to face. Frankly, I don't want to take on that offense. The good news is that offense will probably have to travel into cold weather and then they'll shrink. But man, Miami is salvaging this thing. New Orleans salvages a win over the Giants 14-11. That's not a misspeak by me. 14-11 final score. Drew Lock really tried. Man, Drew Lock was trying to will the Giants somehow to a win at the end of this game. And I know Giants fans were sitting there saying, "Don't you dare, good sir." Like they're in the same boat. They'd rather have the draft pick right now. But man, I don't know what to make in New Orleans, because the thing of it is, right now, so many teams that stink have their eyes on the future of like, hey, don't worry about it. We stink right now, but we've got this huge future ahead of us. We'll be able to get a new quarterback or a new coach or a new whatever. There's just not much that the Saints can do about the fact. I mean, Derek Carr leaves this game with an injury to his left hand, possibly a concussion. We don't know his status moving forward, but we know that his contract, as C-Rob broke down on Inside Coverage this week, is such that like much of this Saints team is locked in. They're either in contracts or they're going to have to rebuild the whole roster. If you're the Saints, you won this game 14-11. Congrats. But, man, it just looks like New Orleans is going to be bad for the next several years.
Yeah, this is a really tough situation they're in because they just kept chasing mediocrity. They just kept kicking the can down the road with the free agent, with the salary cap. And Chris Olave is a nice player, but they traded like 5 draft picks to go get him. And I mean, just stuff like that where there's just no long-term planning, and that eventually is going to catch up to you. I think it probably does. At this point, we don't know Derek Carr's situation, but why play him the rest of the year, really? I mean, he's there was a report that he has a fractured left hand. Like, yeah, it's not his throwing hand, but what's a point in kind of getting him out there? So you just look at the Saints are playing hard for Darren Rizzi, their interim coach. I respect them for that, but they just beat a really, really bad Giants team. Drew Lock was horrible in this game for the 3 quarters. Rallied, like you said, they had a chance. And then even at the end, like, this is the Giants season. And again, Giants fans probably don't mind this too much because of the draft stuff, but they get into a position to kick a 35-yard field goal and get it blocked. Like, this game, you could have gone to overtime. Not that we needed to see more Saints Giants, but even when they have a 35-yard field goal to tie the game in the last seconds, they can't even accomplish that. You do have to wonder about Daboll, what they're going to do there. I know they talked about we're going to be patient with these guys because we've been impatient the past few guys. But I don't know. It just seems like it's backsliding for Brian Daboll. I don't know if that's just that the roster stinks and he's going to be much better in his second turn as a head coach with a better situation. But right now, this Giants team has just nothing. They're just it's been a while since they've been good. And like the Saints, it might be a while until they're good again.
Yeah, again, Control, Alt, Delete. That's what they need to do. Just reset the whole thing. All right. The shocker of the day, almost. The Eagles and Carolina. Philly pulls out a 22-16 win thanks to Xavier Leggett near completion. He was diving. I thought he had it, and then the replay showed he juggled it. It looked like Carolina was about to go out and beat Philly. But here's the thing. You and I are dabblers, all right? So maybe you and I are degenerates. There's a bettor in Kentucky that bet $3.1 million on Philly on the money line here to win $442,000. Now, to put that in perspective, y'all, if you bet 31 of your dollars, you would make $4.42. There is never a time, I understand, Frank. I don't care how much money you have. I would not bet $31 if my return was $4. I wouldn't bet $310 if my return was $44. Like, that's the ratio here. I don't, you got to have a lot of money in the bank to bet $3.1 million to make $442,000. I don't understand it.
I don't get it either, because if we've learned nothing, this is the NFL. Like, weird things happen every single week. It's why you were knocked out of your survivor pool in September, right? Like, we see upsets happen all the time. Nothing is a lock. Nothing is like, me and you know this, Fitz. Whenever somebody's like, I got a lock for you, I'm like, no, you don't. There are no such things as locks. And there's definitely no such thing as a lock in the NFL. Yes, betting the Eagles minus 700 on the money line, a nosebleed bet too, and just trying to win $442,000. Hey, good for you. I'd take $442,000 today. But I don't know that I'm wagering $3.1 million to do it. I guess he got the win. He or she got the win, like, because of Xavier Leggett drops that pass inside the 5-yard line. A tough catch, but what he could have made and won the game for the Carolina Panthers. So, hey, if you have the stones to bet $3.1 million on anything, I guess you just live with the results at that point, right?
So while we're living with the results, is it possible we are watching in front of our very eyes the Carolina Panthers turn a massive corner? Because hear me out, 3 straight losses, but they lose to Kansas City in a game that took Mahomes going off at the very end with a great run to get them in situation to win it. Then they lose to the Buccaneers, who could be a playoff team, in a close game. And now they lose to the Eagles, one of the best teams in the league, in an incredibly close game. Like, I think maybe the death of the Panthers is put on hold a little bit. Like, we were sitting here 2 months ago saying that there was a real chance that they were going to have the first overall pick and they'd be the worst team in possibly sports history to be in that situation yet again. And instead, what we've seen is tremendous growth from the team week in and week out. Yeah, I mean, Bryce Young's numbers weren't incredible in this game, but Bryce Young, I thought, did a nice job of, frankly, running around and trying to make plays. Chuba Hubbard had a nice game in this situation. Thielen sort of drank from the fountain of youth, got himself open a lot in this game, but I was watching this offense cook, and I was thinking, man, they are better than I've given them credit for. Like, suddenly a win over Carolina isn't a given at this point. I think maybe it's time to start acknowledging that the building blocks are being put together in such a way that Carolina is actually growing a foundation for the future.
Yeah, and another reason you shouldn't bet $3.1 million on them to lose in a game, because we have seen strides, a lot of strides. Look, when they were 1-7, I was making all the jokes about them and how they look legitimately like one of the worst teams I've ever seen. I give a ton of credit to Dave Canales. This thing could have gotten away from him. He's a rookie head coach. He coaches for the most impatient owner in the NFL, David Tepper. And you started to wonder, is this guy going to get fired before the end of his first season? Like, that's how bad it was. Since they kind of bottomed out, they've gotten a lot better. He's helped Bryce Young turn that corner. Bryce Young looks like a totally different player. Like, he's not a superstar yet, but you could see the strides there. You could see the strides from this team as a whole. The defense is playing a lot better. This defense was miserable early in the season. They're actually competitive now. And like you said, 2-3 over the last 5 with 3 really, really close losses to playoff teams. The Buccaneers are going to win the division, so I think we could safely say 3 playoff teams. And it reminds me a lot of last year's Cardinals, where Jonathan Gannon, they didn't win a ton of games, right? They were 4-13 last year. But late in the season, they were playing everybody tough. They did get a win at Philadelphia. And you just go into the offseason feeling like, yeah, we went 4-13. But there's a difference between that kind of 4-13 and the 4-13 we're talking about with the Titans or the Giants. Or this one had hope attached to it because you played really well late in the season. You could see the rookie year head coach, all of his, culture taking hold. I think the same thing's happening with the Panthers. I just a ton of credit to Dave Canales for keeping them on track, not panicking. Honestly, a little bit of credit to David Tepper too for, I guess, not panicking. We kind of thought he might. It has been a pretty big 5-week stretch for the Carolina Panthers. Not in winning games, because 2-3 is 2-3, but they've looked 180 degrees different. This is a team making strides, and you alluded to, they're not going to be an easy out the rest of the year.
Yeah, I'm so happy for the fan base at this point too, because constant change and constant turmoil is exhausting for fans that don't deserve that. Like, no fan base in the entire NFL, no fan base in sports deserves to watch their team just constantly be incompetent. And Carolina fans have had to suffer through that year in and year out. It's funny, and we'll get to the Raiders in a minute, but I was walking through the store after the Raiders game. I went over, I was going to grab a few things to make a quick dinner during the afternoon games. So I'm walking through the store, I'm getting some chicken, right? And I'm wearing my Raiders jacket, because always I wear this. And as I'm walking through, a guy working the store just turns around, he's like, "Raider Nation," screams at me. I'm like, "Yeah, what's up?" The whole thing. And he's like, "Man, tough year. They're always tough years." And I kept thinking, what's it feel like? Like, in all seriousness, what's it feel like to be a Chiefs fan right now, where you wear your jacket or your hat or your hoodie out and you high five somebody else? You're like, "Yeah, we kick ass." Or you're a Bills fan and you're wearing your hat and your hoodie out and you're giving high fives. You're like, "Yeah, we're going to get them this year." Like, what's it feel like? Because for a bunch of teams, and Carolina fans, you feel this to your core. For a bunch of fans, when you wear your favorite team's gear out, you wear it knowing that if you see another common fan, instead of that like high five energy, that vibe, you're just going to have this mopey Eeyore, woe is me, God, our team sucks energy. And it's exhausting. Like, I want Carolina to go on a run, because no fan base deserves to be just disappointed by their owner year in and year out, and their team the way Carolina has done this year in and year out. Frank.
Yes, Jets in that conversation. Not a 14th straight year without a playoff berth, longest in North American sports. Yeah, it stinks. It stinks to be a bad franchise year after year after year. And at least now there's hope for the Panthers. If I'm a Panthers fan, after 8 games, I was like, "Oh my goodness, this is going to be bad forever." Now I'm like, I can see a light at the end of the tunnel. Maybe we got the right head coach. Maybe we're going in the right direction finally. And that's the vet. Like everybody talks about tanking, right? You got to tank to get draft picks. Blah blah blah. That's not always the goal. Sometimes winning is good for the soul. Sometimes it's good for your culture. Sometimes winning games that are quote unquote meaningless actually have an impact in coming years. And I think that's what we're seeing with the Panthers.
All right, we got a bunch more games to break down, including the new first overall pick in the NFL draft. We'll do it in just a second. All right, Frank, we're number one. I can get a foam finger made, be like, we're number one, because as of right now, if the draft were today, the Raiders have the first pick after losing to Tampa Bay 28-13. Like this is a scratched record, broken record for me. Close game, a couple of plays went the wrong way. Aidan O'Connell injured in this game. They had to take him off on
cheap
a cart.
Shot, right? Cheap shot.
I mean, it was a cheap shot. Like he was pushed.
He should get. I sat here last week talking about Al Shahir being suspended. Cansey should be suspended too. That was a cheap shot. I mean, like it was a cheap shot that I think broke it. I haven't heard the diagnosis on his injury, but it looked like a tibial fracture or something to that end where Aidan O'Connell's probably done for the year. Well, somebody should pay the price for that. That was a cheap shot. Like it was. He didn't know that he was going to get pushed in the back. Like 2 steps after he threw the ball, he did. He lands funny because a 300-pound dude pushed you in the back, and now he's done for the season. Like that's not fair. That's not right. Like that's something the NFL is going to look at this week, and I hope he gets suspended. I do. I think he deserves it.
It would be shocking to me if the league doesn't make a statement of some sort for sure. And, these are the moments where if it wasn't Aidan O'Connell, it probably would have been a much bigger story, right?
Yep,
like just people
right.
don't care
right. You're 100%
at that point. Now, if you're the Raiders, I'll ask you a question about them in a second because it's only the second time in my entire life, only the second time ever, the Raiders right now, if the draft were today, would be the second time that they'd ever had the number one overall pick. But let's start with Tampa Bay real quick. They win 28-13. Baker was careless with the football. I think we have to acknowledge that this was not a great game for Tampa Bay. This Raiders defense was able to get after Baker. They made him uncomfortable. They forced some turnovers. He had a lot of bad throws. He got away with some stuff in this. Like, Baker's got to play better for Tampa Bay to have a shot to be anything this year.
They took a 14-zip lead, and you're like, oh my goodness, this is going to be like 52-3, that kind of a game. And credit to the Raiders for staying in it. But I also think the Buccaneers let down a little bit. It's kind of human nature. We're playing a 2-10 team and we're up 14-zip. Okay, we're good. And then all of a sudden they weren't good. So I don't look at this as like some big problem for the Buccaneers. But you're right. Baker's got to be better than he was today. That team as a whole's got to be better than it was today. Bucky Irving gets hurt after his monster game. He misses most of the game. But Rachaad White filled in pretty well. But the fact is the Falcons are such a mess right now. The Buccaneers are just going to walk to the division title, I think. I don't think the Falcons can get out of this tailspin. So I think the Buccaneers are on their way to having to winning this division just almost by default. I don't know if they're a great team, but they're pretty good. And they win with their C- game today against a bad Raiders team, I guess. Now, here's the thing about the Raiders. Like, go back to your favorite team because now they are in, pole position for the 1 pick. We'll see how the tiebreakers shake up at the end of the year. But the thing is, like, you're getting that 1 pick to overdraft a quarterback. Like, I don't think Shedeur Sanders is worthy of the first pick of the draft. I don't think Cam Ward's worthy of the first pick of the draft, but that's who the Raiders are going to take, right? Like, you can't get the first pick and not take a quarterback if you have no quarterback whatsoever. Even if you're overdrafting one. So it's got this weird spot to be. And I think you know this. Most people, I'm a big Milwaukee Bucks fan, right? Like, I love the Milwaukee Bucks. Way back when we win a lottery. Oh my God, this is awesome. And it's Andrew Bogut. It's like, oh, we can't win a lottery when it's LeBron James? Like, well, we got to win it when it's Andrew Bogut? That's, I think, what it must feel like for you, where you're like, yes, we get the first pick. We're going to get a quarterback, but is this a quarterback I really want? I mean, I don't know. Maybe they'll be, either of those guys will be stars in the NFL. But I think a lot of, the Nate Tysons of the world who break down the draft all the time have a lot of questions about whether these guys are worthy of being that high in the draft.
If we're being honest, I think there's a very real shot that the Raiders, who I don't think will win another game this year, are going to completely clean house this offseason, and they're going to attack the draft with the number 1 overall pick. The problem is they have the number 1 overall pick in what looks like it could be one of the weakest drafts we've seen in decades at every position. So now you've got a draft where, congratulations, you got the top overall pick, and the draft sucks. Oh, and you
nobody's
really
trading
need a
up.
quarterback.
You can't pull Chicago Bears and trade down, and the Carolina Panthers give you the world for it. I don't think anybody's trading up to the number 1 pick this year.
Exactly, because if you agree with most consensus mocks right now that will tell you that Travis Hunter is the best player in this year's draft, a number 1 overall pick at wide receiver is supposed to be the next Randy Moss. Like, nobody is fighting over themselves to trade up to draft Travis Hunter. So it's a very weird situation to be in, where you're going to be picking first if things hold as they are now. You desperately need a quarterback. The quarterback's not worth the number 1 overall pick, but you can't trade down. And frankly, nobody else is really out there that is worth that number 1 overall pick. Like, I don't know what to do. I know my favorite team doesn't have a quarterback, and I know that neither Cam Ward nor Shedeur Sanders is worth the number 1 overall pick. But frankly, neither of them is worth the number 4 overall pick either. But you don't have a choice. So the problem is, you're going to draft somebody, and according to most pundits, I hope we're all wrong, but according to most pundits, those guys that you're talking about drafting are not going to be wildly successful. And then everybody's going to turn around and they're going to say, look at this, another stupid move by the team, wasting a draft pick without the context of saying, okay, what the hell else were they supposed to do? Like, we cut these clips all the time for social media. I don't want to cut this clip for April. I want to cut this clip for 5 years from April, when people are saying, oh yeah, but the Raiders had the first overall pick in the draft and they blew it because they selected Shedeur Sanders. What the hell else are you supposed to do? There is no other option. And I think that's the part of this that just stinks. It stinks when your team's bad, but it stinks when you're looking at it saying, we're so bad, we're going to have the number 1 overall pick in a draft that doesn't have a single player that you look at and say, oh my God, I can't believe we get that guy. It's a bad year to be bad, and nothing changes bad luck.
Yep. Andrew Bogut, told you.
Andrew
Bogut.
Bogut.
Had a couple of good years, but whatever. It's like, oh, well. Then some kid from Greece showed up at our front door a few years ago, and it ended up okay for me. But yeah, you don't want the number 1 pick when it's Andrew Bogut as the first pick. You probably don't want the number 1 pick when it's going to be, I guess, Shedeur Sanders as the first pick.
You know, the funny thing is, like, if we're being honest, the Raiders would be killed less if they had the number 1 overall pick and they spent that number 1 overall pick on a surefire offensive lineman, like the kid out of LSU, or if they spent the number 1 overall pick on Travis Hunter, and then they spent the first pick in the second round on a quarterback, I think they would actually be killed less if that was unsuccessful than if they turn around and they take Shedeur. When your options are Desmond Ridder and, Aidan O'Connell and Gardner Minshew, somebody tell me what choice you have.
I know. Yeah. What do you do? Like, and you're right. Taking an offensive tackle or taking Travis Hunter probably does make more sense. Like, honestly, like, it really, if we're being truly honest, that's what you got to do. But right after you kind of settle for Brock Bowers, and Brock Bowers is awesome. I get that. But Brock Bowers is having maybe the greatest rookie season a tight end has ever had, and you're 2-11. Like, he didn't move the needle at all. Like, it's just one of those, like, you have to get a quarterback at some point, and telling your fan base, no, we're going to pass. And oh my goodness, if you do that and Shedeur Sanders ends up being a Pro Bowler, like, then you're just going to get killed forever. So it's just a very, very, very difficult. You think about it, this is great. We get the first pick of the draft, but it ends up being kind of a miserable situation for the Raiders because you're kind of stuck in a no-win situation.
Pittsburgh absolutely dismantles Cleveland 27-14. Didn't feel that close. I say dismantle because it didn't feel that close to me. Pittsburgh, don't look now. I mean, Pittsburgh right now is absolutely dominant, right? The Steelers are absolutely capable of beating anybody. I know Cleveland's no good, but I just kept watching the Steelers thinking, man, I don't want to face that defense in the playoffs. I think Pittsburgh has made it very clear that they are in the upper echelon. Like, I used to say that it was a 2-team, Kansas City and Buffalo, and then like everybody else. Nah, I think right now Pittsburgh is playing on the same level as Buffalo week in and week out. And they deserve that same level of credit. I think Pittsburgh is showing that they're Super Bowl caliber this year.
Yeah. I mean, why can't the Steelers beat the Chiefs? The Raiders almost beat the Chiefs. Like, I mean, really, like, let's be honest. This game, I mean, first play of the game, I believe it was first play of the game for the Browns from scrimmage. Like, TJ Watt almost took a handoff. It was given to Nick Chubb, but TJ Watt was in the backfield so fast that he basically was tackling Nick Chubb by the time he got the ball. It was one of those plays where you're like, yeah, that's why that dude is one of the best players on the planet. And the rare defensive player who absolutely positively changes everything the Steelers do. TJ Watt's awesome. Going to win defensive player of the year again. His brother, they showed JJ Watt like 19,000 times during the broadcast. As a Wisconsin alum, I appreciated it. I don't know why they kept showing him over and over. But anyway, Steelers just keep playing good ball. Russell Wilson, the story's incredible how he's revived his career. They didn't have the best of days today, but George Pickens was out.
He wasn't great today, but no Pickens was a big part of that. Like, we got to acknowledge no Pickens was going to take away a lot of their explosiveness on offense. He was 15 of 26 for $158. They didn't even really run the ball well. Like the funny thing is the Steelers offense didn't do anything that made me say, ooh, Steelers offense. It just doesn't matter at this point. Like the Steelers are starting to feel reminiscent of the way we felt about the Ravens 20 years ago, where it's like, man, here's the thing. You're not going to get more than 14 points on them. You're not going to hit more than 20 points on this team. So all they got to do is score a little bit and they can win every time.
Again, what's the weakness for the Pittsburgh Steelers? Like that's what when we're getting into the playoffs, and I get maybe they don't have a Josh Allen who's just going to kind of carry you when you need a touchdown with 3 minutes left in the game or anything like that. But I look at the Steelers team being so well-rounded without a weakness, and that's not the kind of team you really want to play into playoffs. And, look, if you're the Buffalo Bills who lost today, you're tied with the Steelers now. You might have to go to Pittsburgh before you ever have to worry about the Chiefs. I don't want to do that in January. I don't want to play this Pittsburgh team.
Yeah, I think home field advantage is going to matter a lot in that sort of a setting. San Francisco, 38, the Bears, 13. I mean, Chicago's broken. Everything's broken. But this was a big moment for San Francisco to come out and finally get what, I like to call them beer games. So you're putting your feet up and having a beer at halftime. Like San Francisco whooped the snot out of them.
Yeah, Isaac Rendo looked pretty good, filling in for Christian McCaffrey. He was dealing with injuries late in the game. We'll see how he comes out of that. But yeah, San Francisco looked good. But this Bears team, and Jory talked about that this week. Jory Epstein, our colleague on Inside Coverage, talked about, okay, you fire Matt Eberflus, and you probably had to do that, but elevating Thomas Brown and putting too much on his plate is just kind of a Bears move. Like, what are you doing? Like, that's dumb. Like, pick another guy off the staff. The one thing that was working for you was that Caleb Williams was kind of turning a corner with Thomas Brown calling the plays. And all of a sudden you make Thomas Brown your interim and he's got to deal with everything that comes along with being that. He can't just call the plays anymore. And I thought that affected them in this game. I believe they had 4 yards in the first half, if I remember right. 1 first down. I do remember that.
It was 2 yards because somebody tweeted out, if you got up from your kitchen and walked to the count to get a drink, you had more yards in the first half than the Bears did. Yeah.
But one of the worst halves of football you could possibly play. And I think a lot of that had to do with this interim head coach has got too much on his plate because the Bears can't make a right decision to save their lives. So the Bears are just kind of dead. And you just hope that Caleb has a kind of a positive end to his season. He did play better in the second half, kind of like he did on Thanksgiving when they had miserable first half, kind of rally in the second half.
I would sit him. I would just sit him at this point. You're not doing anything to help him. You're not giving him reps that are meaningful.
I want to give him reps, though. I want to give him, but I get what you mean. Like, this is just a miserable situation at this point, but I get it. I understand where you're coming from because you almost, at some point, bad habits get ingrained in you when you're playing behind a bad offensive line and your coaching staff's in upheaval and all this kind of stuff. So I do get it on that. What about, do we think there's any chance that the 49ers come back? Like, I get it. They're 6-7. You're 2 games behind Seattle. Is there any hope? Is there any hope that they make the playoffs? Because they're still that team where I go, this is one of the more talented teams in the NFL. I get the injuries, but I don't understand how they're 6-7 necessarily. But if they get in, like on the offhand chance they get in, it's not a team I'd really want to play in January.
I mean, the bigger thing for them is they still have a shot at the wild card. Right now, the Rams are the last wild card in the NFC at 7-6. San Francisco's only a game out of the playoffs. Now, obviously, Atlanta, Arizona, San Francisco all have the same record, which turns into wild tiebreaker situations. But yeah, the 49ers still have a very real shot at the playoffs. And you're right. I mean,
they probably got to win out, but the team I watched today could win out. Like that was a pretty good football team. That's like, where was this all season? If you're a 49ers fan, you're probably just as happy as you are to see them play that way, you're probably just as annoyed of like, why did this take until December 8th to get here? What were we possibly doing all season when this was their whole season?
What's hard for them is they have the Rams this week, which would help their playoff standing, but then back-to-back games at Miami and then versus the Lions before they finish with the Cardinals. So they've got to play really. They've got to be the 49ers we thought they could be every one of those games. So I think that's asking a lot of this team, but we'll see. Monday Night Football, Simpsons game. I'm watching the Simpsons broadcast of it because this game is just going to be absolute dog turds. Cincinnati at Dallas. I said it the nice way so that Stone wouldn't have to. If you want to name this episode "Dog Turds," you can. Stone, you have my permission. Cincinnati.
I think he names every episode that. Like he just doesn't tell us. Like
that's fair. That's how that is in the archive. Cincinnati at Dallas. Cincinnati favored by 5.5. Both of these defenses probably don't even take the flight in. Like this, we'll just make it 7 on air and then see which quarterback gets the most yards. Like Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase Brown, they're going to get fed. I think they're going to run Dallas on this one. What do you think?
I have to think that way too. At the end of the day, it's just Joe Burrow against Cooper Rush, right? Like, I guess there's a reason for this. Now, Cowboys defense has played better since Micah Parsons came back. They've actually been pretty good the past few weeks. The Cowboys have been competitive. They've won a couple games somehow. I guess they played the Giants, that helped. But yeah, I don't see how the Bengals don't kind of get right. But it's kind of like we just talked about 49ers. We've been saying all season, like, this team's got so much talent, blah, blah, blah. And then you're 4-8. Like, there's a reason you're 4-8. So I don't know that a 4-8 team should be laying 5.5 on the road against anybody. But I guess at the end of the day, I'll take the Bengals if I have to take one of these teams.
Are you Team Simpsons or Team Family Guy? That's the real question.
I do like, I think Simpsons, but it's close. It's pretty close. You're probably a Family Guy guy. Right?
Oh, yeah, I'm way Family Guy. Simpsons, one of the most overrated TV shows in American history. Yeah.
What are we talking? What?
The Simpsons are fine. Like, it's
Simpsons,
okay.
Like, we're talking about, like, you're not talking about, like, season 27 of The Simpsons, right? I'm talking about the original, when, like, Conan O'Brien was on the writing staff and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, their prime from, like, seasons, like, 3 to 8 is as good as television gets. What are we talking about?
See, the early seasons of The Simpsons aren't even as good as the early seasons of South Park. And frankly, all of them are outdone by the early seasons of Family Guy. Like, Family Guy, I'll even take American Dad over The Simpsons. Like, I'll go deep. Bob's Burgers might take that. Like, I like my animated shows.
Come on now.
Bob's Burgers is a delight.
Not The Simpsons, but it's good. Sure, yeah.
Sure, yeah. I know it's not The Simpsons. It's actually good. Okay, Stone is great. He's better than The Simpsons, Family Guy, American Dad, all in one big crossover episode while eating Bob's Burgers. We appreciate his effort making this show happen. Follow us on Twitter. You know how to do that. We'll be back Wednesday with Jory. As always, we appreciate you. I hope your favorite team won, and if your favorite team lost, I hope it helped your draft status and you're happy anyway. It's a good time of the year to be happy. Spread some joy. We appreciate you hanging out with us.